other characters are named Glasses, a criminal who organizes a bank robbery and wears glasses, as you can imagine. Another one is called Teeth, etc. This, of course, gives the film a kind of existentialist tinge, right? Although the film itself is more of an action film with many noir elements, but not as philosophical and as existentialist as Drive from 2011. The story in the film is the following. This film as well starts with a chase, which gives us an opportunity to appreciate the qualities and the personality of the driver, although, as you can expect from a more traditional film, the first sequence also establishes the other main characters, including the detective, played very nicely by Bruce Dern, and the player, a female gambler played by German-French actress Isabelle Adjani. And after the chase, which of course ends with the driver being able to escape the cars sent after him by the Los Angeles police, we are at night, we are traveling through the streets of Los Angeles. In fact, there is probably the same Los Angeles bridge that you see in Drive from 2011, although I couldn't find confirmation of that in the list of locations. After the heist, the heist involves a robbery at a local casino, at a Los Angeles casino. A series of potential eyewitnesses are called in by the police. People who were exiting the casino at the time that the robbers came out running and got on the car driven by the driver and drove away. And from the very beginning, the attention of the police is almost exclusively on the driver, not even the robbers. Because it appears that Bruce Dern, this Los Angeles detective, is part of a special team, and he wants to arrest and bring home a conviction for the character of the driver, exactly because he is so talented that he has been able to complete successfully many robberies. Okay? Keep in mind that the 1970s, the pre-digital era, during that period in American society, especially in large cities, there were many more robberies, included a lot of bank robberies, and it was easier compared to now for the robbers to simply get away with a car, something that is now has become much more difficult, both because of the network of surveillance that is available and also the wider availability of helicopters, for example, the better communication among police units or police of different districts, etc. So the rest of the film, after the first chase, is a game between the detective and the driver. The detective knows that the driver was responsible, that he was driving the getaway car that brought the robbers away from the casino. And he sees right away that the driver will not break under pressure, even under hard interrogation with some violence involved. He will not confess, So the detective organizes a robbery, promises a robber immunity in exchange for delivering him the driver. So they're supposed to hire the driver, rob this bank without killing anyone, and then reveal to the police where they're going after the robbery, where the driver is supposed to take them. The police will be there, supposedly, arrest the driver, and the robbers will get away scot-free or maybe with a short sentence. Of course, after the robbery of this bank, the person who's in charge of the robbery goes to another place with the driver. The accomplices, one of the accomplices is killed, so it's just him and the driver because he wants to keep the money and kill the driver. The driver manages to kill him instead, and he's left, like in the film Drive, he is left with all the money. He tries to exchange this money with clean money, right? Notes that he can spend without being found out in order to leave Los Angeles with the help of the player, of the female protagonist in this trio, right? The protagonists are the player, the detective, the driver. And many things happen before the end of the film. At the end of the film, each of the characters go their separate ways. The detective is not able to arrest the driver or even recover the money, and the driver and the player will not have any kind of strong love connection, even if there is a faint hint of this possibility, especially in the first part of the film. So, in this film, we find a character that is similar in some ways to the driver in the film Drive. Again, is someone who's very talented at what he does, driving a getaway car, driving in general. Someone who can be very cool under pressure during the getaway, during the chase. Someone who's not outright a criminal. In fact, he is teased for not carrying a gun. But then we see in the second part of the film that he himself can become violent. And in fact, he will carry a gun when it's important. And he will be able to shoot glasses after glasses take him to this abandoned warehouse in order to shoot him. And glasses is counting on the naivete of the driver. We find some elements of the theme of protecting others. Clearly, the driver wants to protect the player, but more than that, he wants to survive, continue on his independent life, but more than that, he's interested in winning this game, which is very transparent. The detective wants to arrest him and challenges him to go on with the robbery. The driver understands very well this is a trap. In fact, he asks for even more money than he asks usually, and we know that his fee is much higher than any other getaway driver in that environment. And then, to confirm that he knows it is a setup, when he first meets with Glasses, Thief, and another accomplice, they meet in a garage. Glasses says, I don't know really if you're worth this much money, if your skills are such that I should pay you that much. And the driver says, okay, get in your car. which is a nice Mercedes-Benz from the 1970s with this nice orange color. And he proceeds not only to drive zigzagging through the garage, which has a lot of columns, and turning the car, spinning the car, parking the car in very swift moves, something Bonnie and Clyde could have benefited from, clearly. But he practically destroys the car. This car that was expensive at the time. It's an aged Mercedes-Benz. It was not the 1978 model, but it's still clearly an expensive car. To show them that he knows that they'll go through with this setup no matter what. Because Glasses, the organizer of this robbery, was given a choice by the detective. Either you go through with this and you deliver me a conviction and an arrest for the driver, or you go to jail for another robbery at a supermarket that didn't go as well. So he wants to win this game of cat and mouse. We find another character that clearly has no home, no roots. He lives in a very simple apartment. In fact, it seems like a studio apartment. We see his bed right away in this apartment, and a very frugal space, very anonymous space. So there are some elements of this kind of existence that we can define as a Zen existence, right? Everything is reduced to the essential, and that in turn is one of the elements of a good noir film. We've hinted at the possibility of love between him and the player, but nothing really happens, much less than in Drive. When we will see the chase, which is the scene that I want to show you, look at the similarities in style. The fact that we see shots from inside the car, that we see a lot of shots of the face of the driver. So it's not just about the cars, although it is a longer, much longer chase compared to the film Drive. And remember, this is more of an action film, so a lot of bumping, cars, police cars flying. We even know from the interviews that the director had something in mind for the end of the chase that we will see today, but they couldn't shoot it. Whatever grandiose conclusion, surprising conclusion, dramatic conclusion they had in mind, they had to give up on because they shot the chase scene that is placed at the beginning of the film at the end of their shooting. It was shot at night, and that night one of the electricians fell on a roof, injured himself, and so they stopped the shooting and they ran out of darkness, right? So that was the end of the shooting. Anyway, they made do with the film they had and editing. You also find in this chase sequence that you have the criminals in the backseat. There's clear separation between the criminals and the driver, right? The driver is not exactly a criminal. It's just someone who is full of talents and skills when it comes to driving, but could not make any regular civilian life use of his talent, which is the continuation of a theme you find in a lot of crime action films through the 1960s and 70s, even The Godfather, right? Even in The Godfather trilogy, when you take the character of Michael Al Pacino, you know that he could have been an entrepreneur, a successful manager, a CEO, but his kind was being discriminated in American society because he was an Italian-American, son of immigrants, and so his only chance at deploying his managerial skills is to become the new godfather, to lead the criminal organization. And you find this theme through a series of different incarnations, including what I mentioned even in earlier weeks, the Ocean 11 kind of films shot by people like Frank Sinatra and Sammy Davis Jr. or others, where you see the criminals involved in a heist as the best at what they do, best with explosives, best with safes and opening a safe, best with driving a car, right? So you can empathize with the criminal because you see in them responsibility towards the other, accountability, training, practicing, right? Striving for perfection, values that you can transfer in your own life, right? So you don't have to be involved in a moralistic take of the story of the crime, where the crime damages society and therefore the criminals need punishment, etc. You don't have to feel guilty for liking the guys who rob. Similarly to Drive from 2011, the chase is kind of a cat and mouse game with the police losing track of the driver and then reconnecting until he finally gets away. And that's all I will say for now, and we'll watch this sequence. This film is not available on streaming platform. Of course, I have a DVD. That's why I want you to see this. There are other elements online. I included some shots that show the same angles, the same body positions, postures. For example, even in secondary scenes, when at some point a member of the group that is robbing the bank, but it's a setup, the second bank robbery, goes to the home of connections, the handler of the driver, to know where he can find him, and pushes her on a bed or a sofa, no, it's a bed, and keeps her from her chin while threatening her with a gun and interrogating her, and the camera angle is pretty much the same you find in Drive. So this is one of the films that inspired Drive, but the list could be longer.
And I'm looking for work soon. I like a book.
And then the detective will continue the interrogation. He just assumes that the driver was there, and he will try to put more pressure through a strong interrogation, including some violence. And of course, the driver will not budge, but from this moment on, the game is on between them. One wants to arrest the other, and the driver wants to escape arrest and continue with his life of freedom. That's why survival is one of the themes. So the second thing I want to do today is show you briefly the pages for this week's film, which is Mad Max Fury Road, which is an incredibly beautiful film. Even if you don't like it, it's done beautifully, and it has the kind of complexity, both in the story and the style, that you rarely find in films that you may or may not appreciate, right? The kind of more complex, sometimes longer films that used to be produced in the past. This is not very long. It's only a little longer than 2 hours, but could have been 2.5 hours or 3 hours. It's just so edited so nicely that they could limit the film's length to 2 hours. And in fact, the wife of the director is George Miller. His wife did the editing, and she won the Oscar for editing this film. Something else that is memorable in this film is sound, the way they use sound, the mechanical sounds and the natural sounds to carry on the story, to give it depth. It is made of, even though it is a long journey practically from one point back to it, from the citadel out of it to the green place and back to the citadel, it is made of different segments with a different kind of atmosphere. So again, whether you like it or not, it is very well made, well directed, well acted, well edited, and with very few lines, right? Everything, almost everything is visual, especially the first part of the film. Then you find more lines. But during the first hour or so, often the lines are one or two sentences outside of the premise, of the initial premise, of the sequence that establishes the characters and the story. You find in here the usual stuff, right? The frames, you find them in two different places, from my old wiki called Barzini to a series of PDFs with frames taken at 1 second intervals, more than 7,000 of them. I also included frames from other films. This is a long series of films. The first one is Mad Max, directed by George Miller, shot in Australia. And this was a low-budget film that became a huge global success. And that's how they did then Mad Max 2, The Road Warrior, which was successful, but not as much as Mad Max Beyond Thunderdome from 1985, which is another film that I recommend, with Tina Turner, for example, and a beautiful song by Tina Turner in the film. You can find Mad Max on Amazon, but you can find it on other platforms, from YouTube to others. And they made a Chrome version of it, which I have, and it's incredible. It's not a black and white. It's a different kind of print, but allows you to see even more details, and gives the post-apocalyptic story in the film a different kind of feel. So it's like a different film. Of course, I've included reviews, I've included the script, and of course, like the other script, is not exactly what happens in the film, right? It's not the final script that you find online usually. For the viewing notes, which I'm sad to announce will be your last viewing notes. Not your last assignment, because there will be the last film essay the week after that on the film Green Book. But the viewing notes on Mad Max will be the last of the viewing notes. And for these notes as well, I've added specific instructions, because at this point you've done so many of these assignments, you've been good at it, and you can do better, right? And I see that you can. In fact, sometimes some people do even better when there are special instructions. So instead of just describing what you see, focus on some of these points. The fact that so much of the story is just presented through visual elements instead of having a character narrating the story. A lot of scenes where you have nature. Nature plays an important part. And then the most important element for this film, the most conspicuous, is the fact that you have in this post-apocalyptic world a mix of natural and industrial elements, including a lot of fluids. So a lot of blood, but blood is treated differently. It's not just blood that comes out of a face of a character that is punched. It's much more than that. The main character of Mad Max, is transformed into a portable blood bag attached to a pole, a perch in front of a car, with an IV line going into the body of the driver, who's a war boy, a warrior for the Citadel, chasing after Charlize Theron, Imperator Furiosa, who's driving this rig and escaping with the brides from the Citadel. Of course, water plays a very important part in the film, but you even find human milk in several scenes. Of course, gasoline plays a very important part. It's called gasoline in the film, Guzzo, and then Line. But you find also paint, white paint on the bodies of the war boys and the war paps. You find what they call chrome, which is a silver spray paint that the war boys spray around their mouth and gives them a kind of euphoria, and they do that before trying to do something heroic, which might result in their death, when they're trying to do some kamikaze action. There are different kind of prostheses, such as a breathing apparatus on the body of Joe Immortan, who's not able to breathe naturally. IV lines, as I mentioned. Charlize Theron, her character has a prosthetic arm, etc. Of course, you find in the film, especially during the car chases, a lot of different vehicles. They're all modified. You see elements of vintage cars, but many of them merged together. They worked a lot on these vehicles. They're really something. In a visual film, they paid more attention to what the vehicles look like. So they're not as predictable and kind of dull, such as the Batmobile for the last 5 films in the Batman series. They're more surprising, more original. So if you want, you can spend some words on that aspect. And of course, a lot of sequences are shot inside the vehicles, especially the rig, which is this long track with a tank and then another trailer behind the tank, but different compartments. It's like a ship. It's like a small community on the road. So there are interesting ways to present the vehicles themselves. You find the readings, and there are 3 readings that are required. And for the notes, this time I've presented for now just a series of captions, frames with captions, and this should be helpful for you, should be a kind of example, a guide. I've limited myself to the first sequence, and should be a guide to what you can do with the visual elements and how to interpret them, what to pay attention to while you're watching the film. And because I had a lot of frames, I had to create 2 pages because the first one was becoming too heavy, so you have part 2 as well. And I've used the index, the table of contents, to mark the various sections. I put Roman numerals for the sequences that are marked specifically by the director with black frames, as they used to do in traditional Hollywood films from the 1930s on. You have black frames every time you have a development, a significant development in the story. What I did, so I marked every time you have a Roman numeral, it means that there is a black frame. But then, of course, within the sequences, subdivided by black frames, you have scenes, and I've marked those scenes so that you can jump to one in particular if you want to review my notes there. Want to show you what I've done also, that I will continue on Wednesday. When you go to the end of week 12 or go to the syllabus, you find a new page called Shortlist for the Final Exam. And this is what I want to use on Wednesday. I'll introduce the contents now so that you can review them. But then what I want to do on Wednesday is do a kind of demo of what would happen during the final exam. Because in the final exam, from this short list of 4 films, I will pick 3 films and 3 scenes of about 10 minutes. I will show one sequence at a time, then give you about half an hour to work on it. And then, of course, at the end, since the exam is 2 hours, you will have some time left either to add or to review to what you've written. So what I'll do on Wednesday is to show you a similar sequence, a sequence that I would have picked if I had included in the short list Y tu mamá también. I'll put it on the screen. I'll give you a couple of pages to write notes on, and you can write something there. It doesn't mean that you have to write a full response, good enough for an exam. But since we're doing it in class, you can review the material on your computer, on your phone. And what I expect you to do on Wednesday is to give me an idea of what you would include, of the ideas that you would expand on, the topics you would include, so that I can tell you, yes, this is good enough in terms of focus. This is exactly the kind of content I would expect in reference to this particular scene. If during the activity on Wednesday you can write even more, I can give you more feedback and more specific, more detailed kind of feedback. Of course, I'll collect these pages, bring them home, and then bring them to you the next week. And then the week after that, on Monday, I want to go back to the paper and do something about that as well. Let me show you just in these 2 minutes that we have the short list. In the first section, I've included from the syllabus the notes about the final exam so that you can review them. And these are the 4 films, out of which I will choose 3 for the final exam. The first one is Detour, and I've listed here all the pages I've created about Detour so that when you prepare for the final exam, you go to this page, you click on these links, and you prepare from there. Besides, of course, I would recommend that you watch these films again if you have time. That would be of great advantage. Of course, you'll see the scenes in class, right? You'll have this scene. But if you watch the film again, you'll have much more to say. The whole of the film, the whole of the development of the characters will be there fresh in your mind. So Detour is the first option. Second is Il Sorpasso. Third is A Man and a Woman. And the last is Drive. Out of these 4 films, I will choose 3, and then I will show these sequences. The sequences in the exam, you will also find a short summary of each sequence, because I want you to have, without having to just use your memory, I want you to have the title of the film, the name of the director, the name of the characters, right? So that you can really spend more time just explaining what the sequence means, right? Not describing, but analyzing the sequence and how it relates to the rest of the film. But things such as the year of the film, the title, the name of the director, the name of the characters will be there in that short summary. And the short summary will give you also an outline of the sequence itself, right? So that you can use it as a mental crutch while you're writing. So that's enough for today. On Wednesday, I will say a few more things about Mad Max, but mostly I'll be doing this exercise in preparation for the final exam. So please do come on Wednesday. It's an important kind of practice. Enjoy the rest of your day.